Welcome back, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed your lunch. I believe most of us are on to dessert. Before I introduce our keynote speaker, I just wanted to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Sheldon Feldman, who's the Chief of Breast Service. Thank you for coming, Dr. Feldman. And also, as I mentioned earlier, Women at Risk supports a fellowship. It's actually the Susan and Alan First Women at Risk Breast Surgery Fellowship. And our new fellow is here. It's Leslie Taylor. Leslie, thank you for being here. Well, I am truly honored to introduce our renowned keynote speaker, Dr. Susan Love. She has an extensive biography, and I'm not going to say everything about her because we'd spend the rest of the day here. But please read about her because her bio is in the program. She is president of the Dr. Susan Love Research Foundation, where she oversees a research program centered on breast cancer causes and prevention. She is considered one of the founding mothers, I like that phrase, founding mothers of the breast cancer advocacy movement. And as Dr. Pardis mentioned earlier today, we must in our lifetime eradicate this disease. She serves on many boards, including from 1998 to 2004, the National Council Advisory Board as an appointee of President Clinton. I think it says it all when you recognize that she has dedicated her entire professional life to the eradication of breast cancer. I present to you our keynote speaker, our hero, Dr. Susan Love.
Thank you. It's great to be back here. We were calculating, I think it was 5 years ago, I was here, and it's really wonderful to be back. And in the 5 years, we've made some progress in breast cancer. We're doing more personalized medicine. We're mapping, I'm actually on a committee where they're going to map every gene in all the cancers and try to figure them out that way. We're doing better imaging. But, I'm really thinking that we've put the emphasis too much in the wrong place. We've put the emphasis on the cure and on thinking about how can we make cancer and breast cancer into a chronic disease, something that won't kill people. And that's a good thing. But I think it's not bold enough. I think we're not, we're just not courageous enough, and we're not setting our sights high enough. What we really have to focus on is finding the cause of breast cancer and how we can just stop it. And when you talk to people about that, they say, yeah, but it's too hard. It's too complicated. There are too many factors. But that's what we always say when we're trying about diseases. Those of us that are old enough, tuberculosis at one time was very complicated. They had long textbooks about how to treat it and how to diagnose it and what to do. And then they figured out it was a mycobacterium, and now we have drugs. And it's not perfect, and yes, we have resistant tuberculosis, but it became much simpler. Even ulcer disease, when I was a resident, ulcer disease was acid, and it was complicated, and we treated it, we operated, and we did milk diets and all this stuff, and nobody could figure it out, and now it's a bacterial infection, and we do an antibiotic. So, it's simple, and they're always simple in the end, and I think we have to try. Now, the good news is there are new ways to think about cancer and breast cancer in general, which I think give us some hints about how this works. In the past, we've thought about cancer as if it were a foreign invader. This cell comes from somewhere else, it invades our breast, it slowly grows and takes over. And we studied these cells in isolation. We took the cell and we put it in a petri dish and we studied its behavior. And it's sort of like taking one of you and putting you in an isolation chamber and studying your personality without letting you talk to anybody. Not very accurate. Well, it was the same thing with these cells. Well, it turns out these cells don't come from somewhere else, first of all. We grow them ourselves. So they're not Osama bin Laden, they're Timothy McVeigh. They're our own terrorists that we made all by ourselves. And those cells don't live in isolation. They live in a breast with fat cells and fibrous tissue and blood vessels and all kinds of other cells. There's a whole community in there. And those cells are talking to each other and influencing each other. So what we're finding out is it's not just this cancer cell that comes from somewhere else and takes over. It's a cell that arises in a community, and that you need more than just a mutated cell. You need a mutated cell in a neighborhood that's egging it on. And if you don't have both of those factors, you don't have the clinical disease of cancer. So they've actually found, there's researchers who have looked at, Thea Tiltsy has looked at reduction mammoplasties. So people who have had breast tissue removed to make their breasts smaller, she's looking at it as normal breast tissue, and they found little nests of cancer cells sitting there doing nothing. In fact, in one autopsy study, they estimate that 35% of middle-aged women have microscopic breast cancer cells in their breasts that are doing nothing, that are dormant. Now, if you take those cells and you grow them on malignant breast tissue, they act like cancer. And in fact, if you take cancer cells and you grow them on normal breast tissue, they act normally. They make little ducks. They're all pappy and benign. You put the two together, and then you have problems. So the exciting thing about thinking about it this way is that you start to realize there's a lot of different places you can intervene. You can figure out what's causing the mutations in the cells in the first place, and that, obviously, you can inherit a mutation, but that's only about 5 to 10% of women with breast cancer. But also, what else could cause mutations? Well, we know radiation can cause mutations, and there are other things. Could be virus that's causing the mutations, for all we know. And then at the same time, we can look at what's affecting the neighborhood, what's affecting the environment that these cancers are living in that's causing them to be egged on. And that we're starting to get some success at looking at. So one obvious thing that affects the neighborhood, turns out, our hormone replacement therapy. We were talking about this earlier, but it was always a concern that taking hormones after menopause might increase breast cancer. And then when the study came out on the Women's Health Initiative that showed indeed there was an increase, that year a lot of women stopped taking hormones in this country and in most of the westernized countries. And that year there was a decrease of 20% in the incidence, in the number of breast cancers diagnosed. Only in women over 50 and only estrogen-positive tumors. And it only was in the countries where women took HRT. So it's pretty clear that how could that happen so fast? It obviously doesn't mutate cells, but it changes the neighborhood. It egged those cells on. And as soon as you stopped taking them, those cells regressed. And you didn't see something and you didn't have it. In fact, one estimate from Scandinavia is that 35% of cancers diagnosed on mammogram would go away by themselves if you did nothing. Now, we don't know which are the good ones and which are the bad ones, so we don't actually know who they are yet, but maybe we can figure that out. And then maybe, just as with prostate cancer and some other cancers, we could watchfully wait some of them as and then treat the ones that really need to be treated. Another thing that can change the neighborhood is exercise. Now, this was always a tricky one. How can exercise affect breast cancer? And yet, it's really clear. Women who exercise regularly have a decrease in getting breast cancer and a decrease in recurrence if they've already had it. We sort of made up for a while a theory about hormones with that. We said, well, maybe it makes your period longer and you have less hormones. But actually, it works in postmenopausal women too, who aren't having periods and hormones. And now we realize that what it does is it changes the neighborhood of your whole body. It certainly is anti-inflammatory, it blocks a lot of the pro-cancer signals, and besides that, it makes you feel morally superior, which is really, I think, probably its best asset. So, exercise, not taking hormones, and then the other one, which I must say, I changed my mind on. When I was younger, people would say, well, don't you think stress causes cancer? And I'd say, no, stress can't cause cancer. It doesn't cause cells to mutate. That's crazy. It just happened to be, it's just coincidence that people are stressed. But now that we understand that you need both the cells and the neighborhood, now you start to see, well, stress certainly changes the neighborhood. Stress certainly is a more inflammatory process. It increases your epinephrine. It sort of hypes you up, and it has a major effect on your whole body. And certainly that can change the neighborhood. The other day I was at the farmer's market. This woman came up to me, and she said she had had breast cancer 25 years ago, and she just had a recurrence in the same breast, in a similar area. And I said, well, what's been happening in your life? It's really funny to have a surgeon start sounding like a psychiatrist, but I said, what's been going on for you lately? And she said, well, actually, I just had the worst stress in my life. My mother was sick. We thought she was going to die. We had to move her out. Da, 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 da. And I said, well, you see, those cells, I bet you those cells were there for 25 years. They were there, and they were asleep, and then with this massive stress in her life, that changed the environment, and those cells that had been dormant started to wake up. So the great thing about this is it starts to give you a way to think about, even if we can't find what's mutating the cells, how can we really think about how to put them together? And then we need to look as well at the local neighborhood, the breast itself. I mean, it's amazing. We know all the signal transduction pathways and molecular biology of breast cancer, but we're still fighting over how many holes there are in the nipple. Nobody has really mapped out the anatomy of the breast, much less figured out what the non-breastfeeding breast does. We know that a lot about cows and goats and the dairy industry, but actually we don't know about the, quote, resting breast. What is our breast doing when it's not making milk? Which is pretty magical when you think about it. But what's it doing? Just hanging out, literally, figuratively? We don't know. Nobody's looked at it. We don't know what's concentrated in the breast fluid, what's absorbed. Could the carcinogens that lead to cancer be in the fluid? Is it a stagnant pond, just waiting to aggravate those cells? We don't know. Nobody's ever looked at it. We just, cut them off without really thinking about it. So we're now starting to look at what is the anatomy, how does the breast work, and how can we change that local neighborhood? Because the cancer is starting in a breast. Is it the whole breast that's bad, or is it just one of the ducts that's bad? We don't know. Could we squirt something down the duct and prevent breast cancer? Maybe, and we're starting a collaboration here. We were meeting earlier today here at NewYork-Presbyterian to try to study some of these issues and see if we can figure it out. But it seems that if you're really going to figure it out, you've got to get to where breast cancer starts. You've got to look at the local neighborhood as well as the neighborhood of the whole body. Now, the question is, if we're going to figure it out, can we figure it out? Is this really too crazy? And the answer is no, it's very doable. We can be the generation that stops it, that eradicates breast cancer. And the example is cancer of the cervix. When I was a resident, when I was being trained, if you had an abnormal pap smear, you had a total hysterectomy. You lost your fertility for an abnormal pap smear because we didn't know what else to do. So we cut out normal body parts to prevent you from getting cancer. But then we figured out we could do local things. We didn't have to take everything out. That was good. And then we figured out that it was sexually transmitted. Actually, the way they figured out it was sexually transmitted is they noticed these men were married to women who died of cancer of the cervix, and then their next wife got cancer of the cervix. And they went, there's something funny going on here. But they figured out it was sexually transmitted, and now we know it's a virus, the HPV virus, and we have a vaccine. So in 30 years of my professional career, we went from not knowing what we were doing and cutting out body parts to being able to prevent the disease. I have a cousin who had a total hysterectomy for an abnormal pap smear. My sister had a hysterectomy for HPV, and my 22-year-old daughter's been vaccinated. That's really amazing. I mean, we have a way to prevent cancer of the cervix. That's really incredible. Now, what's interesting about cancer of the cervix is that you need the HPV virus. It's necessary, but not sufficient. So you need the virus, but 90% of the people who get the virus, it goes away. And then of those where it persists for a while, another 65% go away. And so it's only in a few percentage that persist in the right conditions, in the right neighborhood, so to speak, that end up as cancer of the cervix. So you can spend a lot of time figuring out those conditions, or you can stop the vaccinate. And when you vaccinate, you don't care what the conditions are anymore. You don't care about the neighborhood anymore. You're not going to get cancer of the cervix. Well, we can do that with cancer of the breast. We can figure that out. We can figure out what it is. Most of the risk factors we talk about are really not that common. 80%, 70 to 80% of women who get breast cancer did everything right and they still got it. That means we don't have a clue. We really don't know what causes it. And especially what causes it in the young women. In the older women, you can argue the hormones and the mammograms are finding it, and we can come up with a lot of things, and most of our risk factors are for old white women, as I like to say. But we don't know in the younger women and in most of the world what the cause is. And we need to look. We need to figure it out. So why is there this difference with cancer of the cervix with no pink ribbons, no marches, no walks, and we have the answer? And breast cancer, which, I was, as was said, starting this advocacy movement in all our pink and all our walks and all our marches, and we're still cutting out normal body parts to prevent a disease. Part of it, I think, is I actually think we're victims of our own success. I think we've raised so much money for research that we're not spending it very well, and we're not focusing it on where we need to go. The second part, I think, is that we have a good animal model, and that's actually a problem. They didn't have a good animal model for cancer of the cervix early on. I mean, you can just imagine the rat in stirrups. It's hard to get to their cervix. It's quite an image, But, so they had to do the research on people. But we have really good rats and mice models, and sometimes they work, and a lot of times they don't work. And I went to my colleagues who are basic scientists, and I said, okay, so why don't you do this research on women? And they said, well, the problem is women are too messy. We can't control them. We can control our rats. We can control their genes, what they eat, what they do, every aspect of them. And it is nice, pretty science. Well, it's nice, pretty science, but it doesn't solve the problem of why women get breast cancer. Rats don't get breast cancer. You have to give it to them in order to study it in them. Mice don't get breast cancer either. We have to give it to them in order to study it. So if we're going to figure out what causes breast cancer, we need to study messy women. Because messy women are who get breast cancer. And we need to study us in all of our messiness. Well, then they said to me, well, we don't know how to find women. I said, aha, I know how to find women. So with a grant from the Avon Foundation, we started the Love Avon Army of Women. And the notion is that we're going to recruit 1 million women who are willing to consider participating in research. So what happens is you sign up, and then we don't take a lot of information, and then we send you emails. Scientists come to us with their studies that they want to recruit for, and then we review them and make sure they're worthy of you, and then we e-blast them out to everybody. And we don't match. We send every study to everybody. Because sometimes, even if it doesn't fit you, it'll fit someone else. We had a study, for example, for women who were breastfeeding. They thought they had a marker in breast milk. And so we sent it to everyone because the 80-year-old woman isn't breastfeeding, but her granddaughter might be, or someone at church, or someone down the street. And so every time you send it out, it gets virally sent out to everybody else. We send you studies about people in Indiana, because you may not be in Indiana, but your sister could be, or your college roommate, or somebody else. And so we send these out across the board. It's cheap because we don't try to match. And we've put out now, we have now 330,000 women in the Army. 80% of them have never had breast cancer and are not at high risk. And 20% of them have had breast cancer. It's important that we have both because we need to compare one group to the other. And we need all ethnicities and all ages because otherwise we're just going to have more data on old white women. And if we don't have the whole range of ethnicities and ages and sexual orientations and lifestyles and everything else, then the data is not going to apply to all of us. Now, you don't have to be in any studies. I tell people it's sort of like eHarmony. You don't have to date every one of those guys. You know, if you get a study and you don't want to do it, you don't do it. I'll never know. We're not going to fundraise you. This is not in competition with any other group out there. This is additional. We're not fundraising. All we're doing is trying to accelerate research into figuring out the cause of breast cancer and how to prevent it. Now, the problem we've had, the Army's been around for about a year, year and a half, is that we're not getting the best studies because it takes 2 years from the time you think of a study till the time you get funded and you're ready to do it. And we've been around a year and a half. So I got frustrated, so we decided we're just going to have to do, in addition, our own study. So we got some money from the government, we're working with the City of Hope, and we're launching the Health of Women study. And this is going to be an online cohort over the next 20 years. So you sign up, and usually what they do for these studies is they give you a 10-page, 20-page questionnaire every couple of years. Well, we're not going to do that. I'm a surgeon, and I don't have that kind of patience. So it's short. You fill out 15 minutes every 2 months. Each one's going to be on a different topic, and then we'll be tracking it along. And it gives us a chance to ask the questions that you want to ask. So do you have a pet theory about breast cancer? Here's your chance. Tell us, and we'll add that question. And we'll show you how we answer and how we do the research. You know, we've all get those emails about underwire bras and deodorant and all the rest of that. Well, let's test it. Let's answer it. If it doesn't work, let's get it out of there. Let's focus on something else that it could be. But so that we can take over research. This is the democratization of research. It's bringing research back into the hands of the people, and instead of just scientists trying to think of nice, pretty science, it's saying, let's figure out and let's use the experience and questions that women themselves have to help address the research. So we'll do some with scientists, some not. We'll do it. We're doing it online, so we're doing even allowing men with breast cancer. We won't change the name, but they are allowed to be in the Army of Women and the Health of Women study, and we'll track them over time. So this system, this way of doing it, I don't know if it's going to give us the answer, but it'll sure give us a big head start and a way to try and a way to test out new ideas. And it'll show the research establishment that we are really willing to step up to the plate and be part of finding the answer and be part of moving it into messy women. And so I ask you all to join. You can join. You can get one of these on the way out. Go to armyofwomen.org. You can sign up. And then once you've signed up, I want you to email it to all those people you send jokes to and get them to sign up. And your sisters, and doctors can sign up, researchers can be part of research as well. I need everybody, because the only way that we're going to end breast cancer is if we are all willing to be there, to step up, and to do it. And I know that we can be the generation that ends breast cancer. There's no question in my mind. We just need the will to do it, and we just need to push forward and be bold and demand that that's what we're going to have happen. And we'll do it. I know we will, because I have an army of women behind me. Thank you.
That was fantastic. Aren't we lucky? I Dr. Love will be signing books. If any of you are willing to, if you want to purchase a book, and she'll be signing books. And at the same time, you can get your Help Our Women card. So, Army of Women, so that you can sign up for that. So don't forget that. There's a book signing as you're leaving. Remember that there's a jewelry sale until 3 o'clock. And I forgot to mention earlier that 20% of the proceeds from the jewelry is going to women at risk. So it's critically important that you continue to support us. So thank you in advance. Remember, I purchased this one. At the last jewelry sale, as well as, this is the bracelet, the Women at Risk bracelet that was designed specifically for us, so that's on sale as you leave as well. Look for the raffle. If you purchased raffles and you dropped them in the little bags, look to see if you're a winner, because the winners have been posted, so you'll have to go and look at where you dropped the raffle into the little bag. That's all ready for you right now. And finally, I want to announce a winner. The winner of the Yankee Legends Suite tickets is B. Ricardo. There you go. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. This has been a wonderful event. I very much appreciate it, as does the Women at Risk Board. We'll see you next year at the 20th anniversary luncheon. Thank you again.